I'll get the disclaimer out of the way first. Timbecon recently became the distributor for Pony Jorgensen clamps in Australia. They reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in doing a review of the clamps, and if so, which clamps. I warned Timbecon that my reviews are not always favourable, but they encouraged honesty rather than sugarcoating it. While I do get to keep the clamps, I'm not otherwise paid for the video, Timbecon don't get to review the video before it's published, and the opinions are my own. But now you know the situation and can decide for yourself what biases I might have and how it affects the video. I wanted to answer a couple of questions. First, are Pony clamps any good? Well, Pony has been around for a long time. They've never been readily available in Australia, as far as I know. Secondly, I wanted to look at what's the best in the larger panel type clamp world. Is that pipe clamps, I-bar clamps, or parallel clamps? Hi, I'm Pop-Up Off-Script Paul, who's filling in for Paul when he can't write a pretty good script and has to settle for me. I can see you're writing an angry YouTube comment. Would you like help with that? Is this because I didn't mention your favourite type of clamps? Is this because I didn't mention the best type of panel clamps, which would be Plano or Frontline clamps, but they cost hundreds of dollars each and you need at least 4 of them? If you're coming to me for advice and your budget is thousands of dollars per clamp, I think you're barking up the wrong tree. I'm a hobbyist who works inside a garage workshop. Hopefully that sorted that out. How are we defining best? There isn't one particular metric to look at. Build quality, clamping force, flexibility in different tasks, and price all factor in. So are Pony clamps any good? If the 3 types of clamps I have are representative of their build quality, I'd have no qualms whatsoever recommending them. Unlike other orange clamps that I've reviewed, they're built well. They've got solid thread, solid clutch plates, and the I-bars come pre-lubricated and are honestly the smoothest operating clamps I've used. To that end, I'll be replacing a fair few of my small F clamps with Pony clamps next payday. Pipe clamps have 2 really great features. First, buying different lengths of pipe, you can change what length the clamp is and even use joiners to make clamps longer for those occasional odd jobs. Secondly, the price. Comparing the price per metre of clampitude, pipe clamps have all other clamp speed. These are a great contender for the best panel clamp. In the past, I've looked at a few different pipe clamps and I'd still highly recommend the Torquata clamps from Timbecon. The H-style design makes glue-ups so much easier. The Torquata clamps are also very well priced for what they are. At the moment, Timbecon haven't imported Pony's regular pipe clamps, but they have imported these, the Deep Reach pipe clamp. These address one of the major weaknesses of regular pipe clamps, and that's the reach. These measure in at 65mm compared to the 25mm of the H-style. Just like their shallower brethren, these will fit on 20mm inner diameter pipe from Bunnings. Now I have something that I can expand for those odd jobs where I need a 3-metre clamp with just a trip to the hardware store rather than selling one of my organs. I'll admit I was a little taken back by the wing nut design for the handle. As the screw is on the sliding jaw rather than the fixed jaw like most pipe clamps, it makes sense not to have the handle quite as large. The flats on the wing nuts do provide a fair bit of gripping surface. If you had to, you could use some vice grip pliers to crank it down even further in an awkward to reach situation. They also have this ring stop which you can thread onto the end of the pipe so you can't accidentally slide off the jaw. Not something I've personally had issues with, but I have talked to others and they've said that this feature has been a lifesaver for them. With that being said, I'm not sure I'd buy just these if you're setting up a workshop. If you're doing panel glue-ups, the lack of sizable feet will present somewhat of a problem. Having more in common with a F clamp than a traditional pipe clamp, for panels any thinner than the throat depth, you'll have to tilt the clamp and that'll be awkward at best. This issue can be somewhat alleviated if you make cradles to raise the clamps up and use cawls to extend the clamping surface. That may be more hassle than it's worth to you. However, if you combine these with H-style pipe clamps, you'll have a fantastic set to start off with. They'll excel in assembly clamping, being able to apply pressure in that one awkward spot that regular pipe clamps can't reach. If I was setting up a workshop, I'd grab 4 of these and 4 H-style clamps, add in pipe, and you'd be looking at under $50 dues each, and that would cover so many different clamping situations. If I was trying to make some sort of marketing campaign, these would be sold with the corny line of, "Good alone, better together." Despite the faraway island tax we're usually slugged with here in Australia, these, surprisingly, come in just a few dollars more than Timbecon's regular pipe clamps, but still a fair bit cheaper than the Rockler pipe clamps. One minor quibble, Pony don't appear to have any non-marring pads available for this model. Some Crubber and CA glue will solve this easily enough though. Now, I'll admit that these are the clamps I was most curious about because I didn't know enough to justify the cost. Why did these exist over parallel clamps? Are they just newer designs of sash clamps? If I was a clickbaity type person, I would have titled this video something obnoxious like, "The best clamps I won't buy." These are genuinely well-built clamps. The bar is far stiffer than most, including parallel clamps, and I don't think I've ever had a clamp that has proper grease in the screw from the factory. And they have a long thread so you don't have to be overly precise with your clamp setup. And these clamps have more clamping pressure than any I've ever used. And the 5 massive clutch plates grip really well. I don't think it would be possible for these to ever slip, but they're not the clamps for me. Hang on, how can these be great clamps, but not for me? Let's start with the big sticker feature, the 7,000 pounds or just over 3,000 kilos of clamping pressure. That's about 7 times what Torqata and Jet parallel clamps can provide and 4.5 times more than what Bessey's K-Body Revos manage. That's a big deal, right? I'm not so sure. There are certain situations where you will want that. If you're making a press like Dana Mate has been lately, the more pressure, the better. For what I'd call normal panel glue up. As it is, I have to use coils on my lowly 1,000-pound parallel clamps because without it, they'll crush the wood. I'm not saying that bigger numbers aren't better, but it isn't a feature that's going to sell me personally on it. Speaking of bigger numbers, these clock in about $5 more than parallel clamps of the same length, and you're sacrificing some considerable jaw depth. Alright, so we've got a clamp that's slightly more expensive, a fair bit less jaw depth, and consequently I struggled to think of who these were for. When talking about it with friends in the US who have worked in cabinet shops, their answer was cabinet shops. When you're doing high volume production with a large crew, I-bar clamps are basically indestructible and can be thrown around, while parallel clamps have far too much plastic and don't survive being thrown on the ground frequently. Likewise, the kind of excessively large clamping force combined with the pretty long thread provides the advantage of not needing the rougher crew to swing mallets to pull parts together. These are good, perhaps even great clamps, but they're much more industrial and more specific use case than any other type of clamp like parallel clamps or pipe clamps. I'll make this somewhat brief as there's nothing really new to add from my last review of parallel clamps. They cost more than pipe clamps, they lack the ability to extend them inexpensively. Some brands, but not many, have joiners that still require you to join 2 expensive parallel clamps together. The flip side is the bar design is much stiffer than pipe clamps, so you end up with less deflection, and the jaws are larger and stay parallel. Less setup of the clamp is required at time for a glue up because the stabilizing foot makes moving the jaw easier. It's off script Paul again. What do I mean by clamp setup time? Best way is going to be to demonstrate that. I've got 2 I-bars here and 2 boards which will simulate a, let's say it's a tabletop or a bench top. The I-bars in this instance are the same setup time as most pipe clamps, so interchangeable in this situation. I've put my 2 pieces down and I don't have enough thread to get all the way to the ends here, so I'm going to have to lift the clamp and advance it. Now that's not too much of an issue, particularly for just 2 boards and 2 clamps. But let's say it's 10 clamps. Let's say instead of being 2 boards, it might be 10, and instead of 2 boards weight, it might be 20 kilos or something like that, or maybe it's part of a cabinet and you've got to lift the whole workpiece up. That's what I mean by setup time. There's a lot more effort involved for these type of clamps for that setup time, unless you're lifting the ends up somehow. The contrast is parallel clamps. I just whack these in here, who cares about setup time? And without having to lift anything, I can advance the jaw. Now that is all thanks to these little adjustable feet. Now yes, there is some setup time involved with there, but most of the time you don't actually need to adjust these. That means the moving jaw doesn't touch the workbench at all. The fixed jaw is slightly larger, but only on the bottom side here. It's a feature that exists on all good parallel clamps, and if they don't have it, I don't think they're good parallel clamps. It's a feature that very, very few pipe clamps have, though some do, admittedly, and I don't think any I-bars have that at all, so as another sort of factor for the parallel clamp advantage for general purpose use. As the name implies, most parallel clamps have jaws that are parallel to each other. Really, they all should be, but my last review of parallel clamps revealed that that was proven not to be the case. Parallel clamps make most people wince at the price, and to make matters worse, they aren't all that necessary, really, for panels or furniture. Plenty of high quality furniture has been made before these were invented, and will continue to be made while people use other types of clamps. I'm not really doing a great sales pitch on them, am I? Alright, so why do they exist? Parallel clamps excel at being, well, general purpose clamps, be it lamination, panel glue-ups, or project assemblies. They have more than enough clamping force for the majority of tasks, and they have a neat trick that no other clamp manages: standing up on their ends. This might not seem like a big deal, but when you've got a smaller workshop and you have a bunch of panels you need to glue up, it's a killer feature being able to stand them up and out of the way while you still use your workbench. I'm unsure if Timbecon will be importing Pony's Cabinet Master parallel clamps. I think the situation's a little bit similar to the H-style clamps, where Timbecon's home brand Torquato is already so good that it may not make commercial sense. I've got no information on that, so I could be off my rocker on that one. To get back to the second question I posed in the opening, what's the best panel type clamp? The easy answer is, it depends. If you're on a budget, especially if you're just getting started and you don't know exactly what clamps you need, go for pipe clamps. A mix of H-style and the deep reach and you'll be served very well. Even if you're not just starting out, pipe clamps are always good to have on hand for those really long but perhaps somewhat rare glue-ups. If you don't have a budget, and you're not a team of people, parallel clamps are likely the best choice. Parallel clamps cover the most range of clamping operations. If you need utterly indestructible clamps, particularly if you're working in a team or have some specific jigs that require, frankly, staggering clamping forces, I-bar clamps are likely going to be a better investment. And I use that word investment specifically. Parallel clamps might be a little bit cheaper, but that only applies if you're not replacing them constantly from rough crew throwing them around. Big thanks to Timbecon for providing these clamps for a review. Thanks to Pony for making orange clamps that don't make me very angry. And thank you for watching.